there was a French and Indian War fort that was lost to history. Everyone inside, men, women, and children, were massacred by the Indians. Now, when this fort was built, it was built for the French and Indian War back in like 1756. So you got to remember, at that time, 1756, we were still a colony of Great Britain. It wasn't the United States. It wasn't the state of Virginia. It was a colony of Virginia. The area where I am sitting right now, where this fort sits, was on what we call the frontier. I'm going to show you a clip right now of a plaque that is sitting out in the middle of a field that explains a little bit about the story and where Fort Upper Tract was supposed to be. I'm at what is purported to be the site of a French and Indian War era fort called Fort Upper Tract. This is an historical marker that was put out in the middle of this field, like we're a long ways away from the road, back in 1971 by a local historical society. Site of a 60 by 60 foot stockade with blockhouse in center, one of a chain of forts authorized by the Virginia Assembly in 1756 to protect settlers in the South Branch Valley. Erected and garrisoned under orders of Colonel George Washington, yes, that George Washington, captured by the Indians and burned April 27th, 1758. Captain James Dunlap and 21 others massacred, none known to have escaped. Then it lists the massacred. All right, bunch of people were killed at Fort Upper Tract. Fort Siebert, which was a sister fort, is up over those mountains right there, right into the sun. I know it's hard to see, and sorry about that. It was a sister fort that fell the following day to the same Indian tribe, and most of those people were massacred, although there were some survivors. I'm going to tell you about that a little bit later. But since we're just standing here right now, I'm going to tell you, Todd and I metal detected this site. This area right here was an area of occupation. Okay, I found a lot of iron, some pieces of pottery, and one button right here. That hillside right there was another area of occupation, a little bit bigger. Found a ton of relics over there. Well, quite a few buttons anyway. Everything I found dated from like the 1790s into the maybe early 1800s. There's nothing here that indicated to me that there was a fort that was burned with people and provisions from 1756. Not on that hillside, not on this hillside, not anywhere on this farm. It was mostly stuff from the 1790 era. That's a conundrum, isn't it? So that's where this story started, okay? Todd was like, let's go down and hunt Fort Upper Tract. Now this field where this plaque was that you just saw has been metal detected a million times by a million people over the years, but I still wanted to check it out, so I started doing some research, and I realized that even though there's a plaque in the field that was put there in, I think, 1971, they don't really know where the fort is. They just think it might be there. In fact, they don't even know what really happened because there were no survivors. The Indians killed everyone in this fort. Next day, they went to the next fort down, Fort Siebert. He somehow talked the colonists into surrendering because they said they'd let them go. Well, they didn't do that. The colonists surrendered, and Indians proceeded to massacre most of the people. I think a couple of them were actually ransomed back some years later back to the British colonists. But yeah, so they don't know if these people here fought and died or if they gave up and died. No idea. French and Indian War, let me tell you about that, because you need some of this, I think you need a little bit of this background. In America, we call it the French and Indian War. The rest of you guys all around the world would call it the 7 Years' War, or the War for Empire. It was basically a war with France against Great Britain, and it was fought worldwide. And in fact, most of the fighting took place in Europe, so you guys over in Britain probably haven't even heard about this part of the fight. Anyway, so we were a colony of Great Britain. The French had just slaughtered General Braddock's army north of here in what is present-day Pittsburgh. It was Fort Duquesne at the time, not too far actually, up on the Ohio River. The Indians start raiding down into Virginia, all along the frontier, all the way up through New England, just massacring and killing the farmers and the colonists, and this goes on for quite a long time. Colonel George Washington, or yes, George Washington, the president, was kind of in charge of this area. He was a Virginia militia person. He wasn't a British Army person. George Washington actually was a misfit back then A few years prior to this, when he was up near Fort Duquesne searching for the French, the Virginia legislator sent him up there to talk to the French and basically tell them to leave. That, you know, Virginians, leave, get out of Fort Duquesne area, you know, that part of the Ohio. And the French had sent some guys out to basically do the same thing and try to meet George Washington. But George Washington, for some reason, and no one knows why even to this day, decided to attack them in the morning before they got up, and they ended up killing a bunch of them. Some important guys too, important Frenchmen. And that started the 7 Years' War, man. He retreated after that battle, garrisoned a fort called Fort Necessity, which is up that way in Pennsylvania. And of course, the French came and attacked him with their Indians, and Fort Necessity was just badly, they say badly situated. It was in a bad spot because it was in a swamp, and it was raining real hard, and all the powder got wet. So they gave up, and the French gave them free passage. You leave the fort, go back home. But they had George Washington sign the surrender papers in French, and the surrender papers basically said that I, George Washington, murdered a high-ranking official, French official. So he gets back to the Tidewater, Virginia, and tells them what happened, and they're like aghast because they did not send him up here to start a war with the French. They sent him up here to ask the French to leave. So he was kind of like blackballed, basically. French and Indian War starts, rolls around, he goes up there with General Braddock, he volunteers, kind of becomes a hero. Braddock gets killed, and George Washington rallies the men, doesn't get hurt, but they lost that battle. So they retreat back through here. Over the next year or two, they start raiding down here, and George Washington sets up these forts. The colonists in the area get word that the Indians are coming down from Ohio. They're raiding, and they're taking all the women, all the guns, and anything that they can get from the colonists. So they're killing all the people in all the farms around here. The people flock into these little forts that they built. Now, they don't know exactly what this looks like, what this Fort Upper Tract looked like. They don't even know what Fort Sybert looked like for sure. But a typical fort of that era would have been like a heavy-duty log cabin surrounded by a big high fence, what they call a palisade fence. And a palisade fence is very important because that's really one of the key features that if you find, you know you found the fort. It could be 10, 15 feet tall, sharpened on the top. You know what I'm talking about. You know this was burned because there was a guy that came from Fort Sybert, and he got to the mountaintop, and he could see that the fort was burning. So he knew that the fort was burned, which means those people were either captured or dead, because that's what the Indians had to do. In order to take a fort, they didn't charge it, would catch it on fire so that whoever was inside either would burn to death or have to give up, because you can't like fight the fire and fight the Indians on the outside at the same time. So history knows that it burned. That's it. Did they fight? Who knows? We don't know if they fought in this fort. Did they, they might have just given up like they did the next day at Fort Sybert. Well, I'm not going to say we have written history, but we have certainly told the story of the people that died here, how they died, and the fact that they were, they didn't give up, man.
She'll shake the coins from your pocket, take your gold chain and your locket. Mother Earth has no sympathy. She'll take the ring from your hand and bury it in the sand and keep it for eternity. Mother Earth, she's got her secrets she's promised to keep, hidden in her dirt or deep in her creek. Mother Earth, she ain't saying exactly what she's saving, where it is or what it might be. Mother Earth, you are my lady, my big round baby. I'll rock you until I go to sleep. She don't care if you're dying or if you're living or somewhere in between. Mother Earth, you are my lady, my big round baby, and I'll rock you until I go to sleep. She'll shake the coins from your pocket, take your gold chain and your locket. Mother Earth has no